It was the call from 13-year-old Megan Zanella, an ordinary girl from an ordinary family, a loving mother, a stepfather, and 2 sisters. But this call to the emergency number 911 changed everything. In her voice, confusion and panic could be heard. The quiet family life was crumbling before her eyes as something irreversible happened to Megan's mother. A sharp object in someone's hands changed everything. But who was holding it? How could a prosperous, closely connected family get into such a situation? Have you ever had cases where you simply cannot remember what happened? Initially, everything looked like a banal case of the daughter's jealousy toward the new person in the family house. But reality proved to be much more complex and deeper. From a difficult childhood to a quiet suburban street, who actually led to the mother disappearing from the family's life forever? They lived in the quiet suburb of Willoughby Hills, a picturesque place near Cleveland, Ohio State. Their life was quite prosperous. Kevin Narfel worked as a truck driver, and Lisa Narfel was employed as a social worker in the Children and Family Affairs Department of Cuyahoga County. Their house did not differ from others. A pretty 3-room cottage near the quiet Chagrin River. In the yard in front of the house, there was enough space for children's entertainment, a trampoline, and a wooden playground with a slide. The children were surrounded by care and attention, and lacked nothing. No one would have thought that their life could derail. On the evening of the 12th of November 2012, Kevin was on a business trip. Lisa stayed home with the children. 3-year-old Haley, the common child of Kevin and Lisa, 13-year-old Megan, Lisa's daughter from her first marriage, and 18-year-old adopted daughter Sabrina. Usually, Lisa put little Haley to bed around 10 o'clock in the evening. The little one had the habit of sneaking into the parents' bedroom after a few hours. 13-year-old Megan went to her room at about the same time. 18-year-old Sabrina, who had recently become an adult, enjoyed more freedom. That night, she sat long in the study working on a school project about British literature. Sabrina listened to music and did not pay attention to the movements of the family members. Until about midnight, she studied for her assignment, then went upstairs and tried to fall asleep. That night, Sabrina could not fall asleep because of a migraine. She left her room and went downstairs where Kevin and Lisa's bedroom was located. Megan and Haley were already sleeping. Lisa was also resting. Sabrina stood in the hallway and took tablets for her headache. What happened next remains a mystery. It is only known that 13-year-old Megan was awakened around 1:15 at night by strange sounds. When she heard the sounds, she rushed to her parents' bedroom, where she discovered her adopted sister, her mother, and a kitchen object in Sabrina's hands. Lisa Narfel suffered multiple injuries. On her arms, traces could be seen. She had tried to protect herself. The tool proved to be a 15-inch long serrated kitchen instrument that had deformed from the force of pressure. Unfortunately, Lisa could no longer be helped. The 3-year-old hid in the closet, and Sabrina's clothing was soaked with the scarlet liquid of her adoptive mother. It was Sabrina who held the sharp object. At 1:17 at night, a police patrol received an emergency call from this normally quiet neighborhood. When the officer arrived at the scene, he saw 13-year-old Megan, who was still clutching the phone with which she had made the emergency call. The girl asked him tearfully to stop what was happening. The law enforcement officer went down the hallway to Lisa and Kevin's bedroom. When he saw what had happened, he ordered Sabrina to come out with raised hands. She obeyed without resistance. The young woman's clothing was soaked with red. She was sobbing and would not let go of the pointed object. On her palms, on the back of her head, and on her legs above the knees, small abrasions were found. When trying to speak with the police, Sabrina was confused and could not speak coherently. But the situation required no further explanations. Megan had seen how Sabrina attacked her mother, and the factual evidence on Sabrina's clothing could not be ignored. But the question arose: why? Why did an ordinary member of this harmonious family commit such a terrible act? What caused her to attack her caring adoptive mother in a state of insane rage? Let us learn more about Sabrina Zunic. She was born in October 1994, and from earliest childhood her life was not easy. Her parents were 35-year-old Mark Zunick and 40-year-old Susan Edwards from Ohio. Both had an impressive list of problems with the law. In 1984, Susan spent 6 months in a correctional facility after pleading guilty to significant embezzlement. 6 years later, it turned out that she was distributing prohibited substances among adolescents aged 14 to 15 in Cleveland. The court decision in this case was postponed because at that time she was giving birth to Sabrina's older half-brother or half-sister. Later, she was accused of obstructing justice. Sabrina's father, Mark, had also accumulated a whole series of legal difficulties, and not only of an administrative nature. Even before Sabrina's birth, he was arrested several times for disturbing public order and driving under the influence. When Sabrina was 16 months old, he was taken into custody for a domestic incident. This was the first of many cases of destructive behavior in Sabrina's early years. Nevertheless, Sabrina continued to live with her father and grandmother in a small house in Wycliffe, separated from her mother, although Susan and Mark still maintained a relationship. A neighbor reported that law enforcement officers were regularly called to their apartment, and Mark was constantly under the influence of substances. When Sabrina was an infant and was bottle-fed, Mark mixed alcohol into her food so she would fall asleep faster. In 2006, when Sabrina turned 11, the situation came to a head. Mark provided Susan with means for acquiring alcoholic beverages and then accused her of embezzling this money. Upon their arrival, the representatives of the law found him in a state of extreme agitation. He demanded that she leave his house and never return again. In an official document, Mark was described as a person with paranoid schizophrenia who ignored taking prescribed medications. His biography was supplemented by further arrests, including driving under the influence and damaging someone else's property until 2012, when he died due to excessive consumption of prohibited substances. At that time, Sabrina was no longer living in her parental home. Since Mark had turned into an irresponsible person with addiction, Sabrina's grandmother was unable to cope with raising her granddaughter alone. As a result, Sabrina was placed at age 14 in a county group home, the Emma Keeley Care Facility, an institution that specialized in structured behavioral correction. Sabrina had well-documented problems with controlling her emotions. She got into conflicts at school, and an acquaintance from there warned that it was better not to bother either her or those she protected, since she would inevitably teach any aggressor a lesson. At age 4, Sabrina was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity syndrome. This and other medical diagnoses accompanied many of her difficulties: emotional outbursts, distortion of facts, substance use, auditory hallucinations, and appropriation of others' property. However, after changing to another educational institution and moving from the group home to a foster family, her behavior underwent drastic changes. In the new educational institution, she behaved quietly and completed her school assignments diligently. Her attendance was impeccable. At 16, Sabrina finally felt that her life was beginning to gain stability. The Knaefel family became her new home. Lisa Knaefel had extensive experience working with difficult adolescents, as she worked as a social worker. Her specialization was precisely the protection of children's interests, and she recognized the importance of empathy, making an effort to show the same understanding for Sabrina. Lisa began her career in 1999, around the time Megan was born. At that time, she was married to another man. This union broke up in 2003. In the year 2006, fate brought her together with Kevin Knaefel, whom she married. Kevin also had experience with family relationships from 1992 to 1997. His older child, born in 1993, lived separately. The circumstances of Lisa and Kevin's meeting and getting closer remain unknown. But in the year 2008, they settled in a cozy house on Chagrin Drive, and a year later their joint daughter Haley was born. The 5 house residents, Kevin, Lisa, Megan, Haley, and foster daughter Sabrina, gave the impression of a harmonious family, at least outwardly. Despite the visible improvements in Sabrina's behavior, the atmosphere in the Narfel house was not as untroubled as it might have seemed. The relationship between Lisa and Sabrina deteriorated almost as rapidly as it had formed. Sabrina told a friend that Lisa made her existence a real trial, and fierce conflicts arose between them. Sabrina felt that Lisa clearly favored her biological daughters and perceived such treatment as unfair. Thus, a division formed in the family. Lisa, Megan, and Haley on one side, and Sabrina and Kevin on the other. It was precisely to Kevin that Sabrina turned during disagreements with Lisa, and he always found time to listen to her and comfort her. Their communication gained an extraordinary closeness. Sabrina's friends noticed this unusual dynamic and expressed concern regarding her family interactions and inappropriate jokes. But no one took serious steps, since the reality seemed incredible. The reality that Kevin was actually exerting psychological influence on Sabrina and involving her in impermissible relationships. Sabrina sincerely believed in their mutual affection, but recognized the necessity of keeping this relationship secret from other family members. Every time Lisa, Megan, and Haley went somewhere, Kevin and Sabrina remained alone. In her iPod, she saved his contact as Kevin Love. When asked about Kevin's role in her life, she answered, "He was a foster father when it was necessary, and a close friend when the father role was not needed." By the year 2012, while Kevin and Sabrina grew closer, the relationships between Sabrina and Lisa became increasingly tense. "She wanted to get rid of me," Sabrina remembered. She felt Lisa's strong attachment to 3-year-old Haley and painfully perceived her attempts to keep them separated. There was an incident where Lisa used physical violence against Sabrina, about which she informed law enforcement authorities. However, the complaint had no consequences. Despite the growing tension in the Narfel house, Sabrina's request to remain with the family after reaching adulthood in October 2012 was fulfilled. Her social worker noticed no problems in the family. Sabrina showed good performance, participated in psychological counseling, and regularly gave negative tests for prohibited substances. Nothing indicated impending difficulties. On the 15th of September, law enforcement officers arrived at their house after a tip about a domestic conflict was received. Kevin and Lisa argued about Megan, with Lisa claiming that her husband had grabbed the girl by the neck. Kevin insisted that he had only led her to the room by guiding her by the back of her head. By the time the police arrived, the argument had already subsided. Lisa had left the house, but Kevin still spoke with the officers in case this episode would come up in divorce proceedings. He shared with Sabrina his intention to separate from Lisa in order to have a relationship with her. Additionally, he inquired with Sabrina's social worker about the possibility of retaining custody of her after the divorce. During a joint outing with his longtime friend David Strunk, Kevin confessed that Lisa suspected him of inappropriate behavior toward their foster daughter. He showed David photos of Sabrina, including professional model-style shots that he had helped her create, as well as underwear that she had given him as gifts. Kevin mentioned consultations with a family lawyer. This conversation took place in October 2012, 1 month before the incident with his wife. On the eve of the 12th of November, the atmosphere between Kevin and his wife was tense. In the evening, Kevin was at work. When law enforcement representatives informed him about what had happened, he immediately made his way to his girls and picked them up from the police station at 5 in the morning. It concerned Haley and Megan, since Sabrina was under police observation. The officers who interacted with Kevin that morning, when his family experienced the tragic incident, noticed his unusual composure. One of the investigators remembered how Kevin talked about his career as a physician and claimed he had been confronted with such situations multiple times and nothing could surprise him, while persistently asking for all details of the incident. Kevin was upset that he was not allowed to see Sabrina and insisted that as an adoptive father he had the right to meet her. Finally, he achieved his inclusion on Sabrina's visitor list. During this time, the investigators conducted conversations with Sabrina to understand the motives of her actions toward her adoptive mother. "I believe she never felt affection for me and wanted me to leave the house." "What are your feelings regarding Lisa's absence?" "What? What I think about her absence?" "She despises me." Sabrina claimed she could not remember the events connected with the incident that affected her adoptive mother. She said she remembered nothing after entering Lisa's room to get medications. "Remember, when we arrived, you were holding a knife. Are you sure it wasn't self-defense? Every story has two sides." Sabrina continued to insist on her memory gap, but the evidence was undeniable. "You are arrested. Lisa is no longer here, and current data indicate your involvement." Sabrina was taken into custody, and Kevin apparently began to arrange his new reality. Almost immediately, he gave Lisa's belongings to the Goodwill charity store and tried to sell her bedroom furniture through Craigslist. He asked David to deactivate Lisa's social media accounts and explained this by the emotional burden from the stream of messages. 5 days after his wife's disappearance, on the 17th of November, he ordered a cleaning service to treat the premises. The employees noticed his amazing calm. He told them that finances were no problem since he had insurance of $250,000. However, the insurance coverage was not exhausted with that. After the incident, he noted in conversation with Lisa's colleagues that her annual salary of $50,000 was a considerable amount that required compensation. In the following weeks, he mastered this task more than well. Through various insurance programs, corporate and individual insurance, Kevin received about $785,000. He actively used these finances. He paid off the mortgage loan for the previously mortgaged residential house and installed a swimming pool, bought new cars, and began flight lessons. While he enjoyed the unexpected prosperity, Sabrina sat in custody awaiting trial regarding his wife. After 9 months, everything changed for Kevin. Sabrina, tired of bearing the burden of responsibility alone, decided to tell the authorities about her relationship with him. She shared the shocking truth. Kevin said multiple times that Lisa should stop being part of their lives. Throughout the entire affair, Kevin promised to leave Lisa for Sabrina. In September 2012, however, he confessed his fears. He was afraid of losing the right to raise his daughters, including Haley, if he initiated divorce proceedings. He told Sabrina about the existence of insurance policies for almost $800,000 and explained that Lisa would be more financially useful to them if she were no longer in their lives. Kevin assured Lisa's disappearance would allow them to be together and start their own family. The couple began to develop their plan. They even discussed this with Sabrina's school friend, Autumn Paulik, when they drove to a Chinese buffet restaurant. They considered the possibility of involving an acquaintance of Autumn's to solve the Lisa problem. In October, Autumn moved to California, and this idea faded away. But Sabrina and Kevin did not abandon their intentions. In early November, they discussed using a firearm system with a special device for silent shooting. According to the plan, Sabrina was to take care of Lisa and Kevin to eliminate the evidence. On the morning before the incident, Kevin drove Sabrina to school as usual. But this time he stopped the car and expressed his concern. He told about a conflict with Lisa that was so serious that he said, "I can't stand this anymore if she doesn't disappear." Sabrina was truly in love with him. Sabrina promised Kevin to solve the problem with Lisa as quickly as possible. They worked out a detailed action plan. If Lisa would be lying on her side, Sabrina should act from the back. If she would be lying on her back, she should direct the intervention to the neck area. Everything was planned for the night while Lisa would be in deep sleep, but with caution not to wake Haley, who normally came into her mother's room in the middle of the night, the key aspect of the plan. Sabrina would claim a mental disorder if she were arrested. Exactly for this reason, she acted during the conversation with law enforcement as if she knew nothing. Therefore, she also claimed not to remember what had happened. She counted on this, providing her protection due to a mental disorder, as Kevin had convinced her. 9 months later, however, Kevin still had not organized legal support for Sabrina, and the strategy with the mental illness had reached a dead end. When she realized that she had been manipulated, she turned to the prosecutors with a plea bargain offer. She declared herself ready to help with the investigation and reveal all information about Kevin's actions. His flawless plan began to gradually fall apart. The law enforcement officers contacted Autumn Pavlik, who helped them by meeting with Kevin to obtain a confession about recruiting the executor. Their conversation was recorded. During this meeting, he confirmed nothing, and numerous search warrants for his apartment, cars, and electronic devices brought no evidence to light. Nevertheless, Sabrina's statements were sufficient. In August 2013, Kevin was arrested and charged with aiding and abetting a special category crime as well as inappropriate behavior toward his adopted daughter. Sabrina took responsibility for the committed unlawful act and received a stay in a correctional facility with the possibility of early release after 30 years, in the year 2044, when she will be 47. Kevin, however, denied his involvement. His lawyers claimed there was no evidence of his connection to Sabrina or his intentions to get rid of his wife. There were only Sabrina's statements, and she was portrayed as an unstable young person with a history of consuming prohibited substances and unreliable behavior. But exactly these circumstances made the situation even more disturbing. The fact that she was young, emotionally unstable, and vulnerable, and he exploited this to his advantage. On the 11th of June 2014, Kevin Knaefel was found responsible on all charges. He was sentenced to 2 years of imprisonment for each of the 6 cases of inappropriate behavior of an intimate nature, and a longer stay in a correctional facility with the possibility of conditional release after 30 years for aiding and abetting an unlawful act of special category. The sentences must be served consecutively. On the 12th of August of the year 2009. The Heidelberg University student Annika Schmidt, 22 years old, did not return from her evening run. Her dormitory roommate only raised the alarm the next morning when she discovered her friend's untouched bed and switched-off phone. The Freiburg police registered the missing person report, but did not attach any special significance to it. Young women often go away with partners without giving notice. Normally, they come back. Annika did not return. After 48 hours, her parents arrived from Munich and insisted on the beginning of a comprehensive search. Tracking dogs, local volunteers, and a police helicopter were deployed. The last signal from Annika's mobile phone was detected at the eastern edge of the forest, after which the connection broke off. We investigated an area with a radius of 5 kilometers from the last location of the phone, remembers investigator Marcus Hoffman, who led the case. Nothing. No clothing, no shoes, no signs of a struggle, as if she had simply dissolved into thin air. The search lasted 2 weeks. Then the intensity decreased, and after a month, the case was practically suspended. Formally, Annika Schmidt was considered missing. Practically her file wandered onto the growing pile of unsolved cases. We had neither clues, nor witnesses, nor a motive, explains Hoffman. Without any traces, an investigation is impossible. Another disappeared woman at the foot of the Black Forest. Such things had happened before. The extensive forests are known for their danger. Every year, tourists get lost between the dense trees. Some die from hypothermia or through falls. Perhaps Annika had simply lost her way. Perhaps she had fallen into one of the numerous ravines and they could not find her. Perhaps. On the 17th of November 2009, 3 months after Annika's disappearance, the local woman Hannah Bauer, 24 years old, disappeared. The employee of the Tourist Information Center was returning home from her evening shift. Hannah's path led along the forest edge, past a bus stop on the outskirts of Freiburg. Normally, she needed 15 minutes for this route. On that evening, she did not reach her home. The parents noticed their daughter's absence around 9 o'clock in the evening and immediately contacted the police. This time, the reaction was faster. The disappearance of 2 young women within 3 months made the investigators suspicious. We immediately recognized a similar pattern, says Hoffman. Both women were about the same age and of similar stature. Both disappeared in darkness, both near the forest. The police questioned residents and checked surveillance cameras. On one of them, Installed at a gas station, Hannah's silhouette could be seen walking toward her home. On the next camera, 300 meters further, she was no longer visible. A thorough investigation of this street section brought no results. The investigators analyzed Annika Schmidt's case again and found another match. Both women disappeared on cloudy, rainy days. Possibly the weather conditions were deliberately chosen to make the search more difficult and to obscure traces. In a statement to the local media, the police admitted for the first time that a serial kidnapper might be active in the Freiburg area. This triggered panic among the residents. Women were advised not to go out alone after dark and to avoid routes near the forest. The search for Hannah Bauer was as fruitless as the search for Annika. The dogs lost the trail after a few dozen meters from the presumed location of the disappearance. The large-scale combing of the forest provided no clues. On the 15th of March 2012, 2.5 years after the disappearance of the first victim, the strongest storm in 40 years raged in the central part of the Black Forest. The hurricane, with wind speeds up to 150 kilometers per hour, broke trees like matchsticks, blocked roads, and tore down power lines. Many localities remained without electricity. The Regional Forest Administration mobilized all available employees for damage assessment. On the 18th of March 2012, when the storm had subsided, Forester Thomas Brenner conducted a routine inspection in an area 15 kilometers east of Freiburg. The terrain was difficult to access even on normal days, and after the storm, progress had become almost impossible due to fallen trees. I noticed an old oak that had been partially split by lightning and toppled by the wind, Brenner recounts. There were many of them that day, but this one caught my attention because of a strange smell. As he came closer, the forester saw in the resulting split of the trunk something that resembled a human hand. At first he thought it was a peculiarly bent root or a fungal growth, but upon closer examination no doubts remained. They were human remains inside the tree. Brenner immediately contacted the police. The crime scene was cordoned off, and specialists from the Freiburg Criminal Department and forensic experts were brought in for recovery. None of us had ever been confronted with anything like this, remembers Klaus Weber. We have seen hiding places in car trunks, in concrete blocks, in acid barrels, but never inside a tree. The sawed-off trunk was taken to the laboratory for detailed examination. Inside were partially mummified remains of a young woman. The decomposition process had been significantly slowed due to special conditions. The dryness inside the tree and the presence of natural preservatives in the wood created an effect similar to mummification. The forensic examination revealed that the remains belonged to a woman aged 20 to 25 years, with a height of about 168 centimeters. Death had occurred through suffocation. On the neck were found traces of strangulation with hands. The time of death was estimated approximately 2 to 3 years ago. The dental examination and DNA analysis confirmed the found remains belonged to Annika Schmidt, the first missing woman. Most astonishing was the method of concealment, says Dr. Erika Meyer, the chief forensic pathologist of Freiburg. The interior of the tree had been carefully prepared. Someone had removed the soft heartwood and created a space that exactly matched the dimensions of the body. Then, after placing the body, the entrance was carefully sealed with a piece of bark and camouflaged with a special mixture that resembled tree resin. Such work required specialized knowledge and tools. The investigators began searching for persons who possessed skills in dealing with trees and knowledge of the forest areas. We were looking for a person who combined the skills of a lumberjack, a taxidermist, and knowledge of Black Forest topography, explains Weber. The list of such specialists was surprisingly short. 15 persons were included in the updated suspect list. Among them were foresters, hunters, wood processing specialists, and forestry engineers. Kurt Waldenberg was on this list, but not in the foremost position. The main attention of the police was given to Hans Müller, a 52-year-old hunter with extensive experience in animal taxidermy, who lived only 5 kilometers from the site where the body was found. During a search of Müller's house, an extensive collection of hunting trophies and tools for animal taxidermy was found. He also had detailed maps of forest areas, including the area where Annika's body was found. Müller denied any involvement in the crime and claimed to have been in other locations on the days of the women's disappearances. While the police checked Müller's alibi, the search operations in the forest were resumed with renewed vigor. Now the investigators knew what they should be looking for. Not underground bunkers or abandoned huts, but specific trees that could have served as containers for the victims. It was searching for a needle in a haystack, says Hoffman. The Black Forest extends over more than 6,000 square kilometers. Millions of trees grow on its territory. It is impossible to check everyone. The investigators developed search criteria. They looked for old deciduous trees with a trunk circumference of more than 3 meters that grew away from hiking trails. Special attention was paid to oaks and beeches with signs of internal rot. Precisely such trees have cavities that can be expanded. Specialists from the Forest Administration were brought in for the search, including Kurt Waldenberg. As before, he actively helped the police and pointed out promising search areas. Waldenberg was very helpful to us in mapping old forest stands, recalls Weber. His knowledge of forest areas seemed encyclopedic. He could literally say where and which trees grow without referring to maps. On the 24th of June 2012, after 3 months of intensive search, the police discovered the second tree sarcophagus, 12 kilometers north of the first discovery site. This time it was a beech tree about 150 years old. It had not been damaged by the storm, but the attention of the search group was drawn by a strange irregularity in the bark at a height of about 2 meters above the ground. The clue that changed the course of the investigation came from an unexpected source. On the 27th of August 2013, the antiquarian Wilhelm Reiner from the city of Tübingen, 150 kilometers from Freiburg, called the Freiburg police. His attention was drawn by a news article about the unusual method of hiding corpses in trees. Reiner said that this reminded him of a strange customer who had acquired a specialized book from him about 10 years ago, reports Weber. The book was called Technique for Preserving Biological Specimens in Wood, published in 1952, only 200 copies. It was used for training animal taxidermists and forest archaeologists. Reiner had stored the buyer's data in his database. The customer's name was Kurt Waldenberg. At that moment, we realized that we had overlooked something important, says Hoffman. We knew that Waldenberg was a forest engineer, but we had not investigated his biography more thoroughly. It was time to correct this mistake. The investigators began to thoroughly check Waldenberg's past. It turned out that before his employment with the Forest Administration, he had worked at the Natural History Museum in Dresden, where he specialized in preserving biological specimens. He had a degree in biology with a focus on entomology and techniques for preserving scientific specimens. Furthermore, Waldenberg had operated a private practice as a taxidermist from 2001 to 2004 and had made animal preparations for collectors and hunters. This information was not hidden, but did not appear in his current resume. Basically, he had the ideal skill set for creating precisely these tree sarcophagi, notes Weber. Knowledge of anatomy, preservation technique, handling of organic materials, experience dealing with animal bodies, and all of this in combination with expertise in forestry. The investigators requested all available materials about Waldenberg's past, tax returns, medical records, educational documents. In his university file, they discovered an interesting detail. Waldenberg's diploma thesis was dedicated to ancient mummification techniques using plant materials. He had studied methods used by various cultures to preserve bodies using tree resins, bark, and other natural preservatives. Special attention was drawn to a chapter on Scandinavian burial practices in cavities of sacred trees, a tradition that existed until the 17th century in remote regions of northern Europe. That was an amazing parallel to the method our perpetrator used, says Hoffman. Waldenberg not only knew theoretically how to do this, he was literally an expert in this specific, very rare technique. While the investigators were examining Waldenberg's past, another important event occurred. The experts completed the analysis of the material with which the entrances to the tree sarcophagi had been camouflaged. The composition proved to be a complex mixture of tree resin, special clay, lichens, and an entomological preservative used to preserve insect collections. This last component was crucial, explains Dr. Lars Schmidt, forensic scientist and chemist. The entomological preservative is a specific chemical without household application. It is used by museums and professional insect collectors. It prevents decomposition and deters other insects that could damage the specimens. The police checked the purchases of this chemical in the region. In the last 5 years, only 3 organizations had acquired it: the Freiburg Natural History Museum, the university's entomological laboratory, and the Forest Administration. In the latter case, the order was made in the name of Kurt Waldenberg for investigation of wood pests. These facts significantly strengthened the suspicion, but there was still no direct evidence. Moreover, Waldenberg had plausible explanations for all his actions. Both the book and the chemicals were related to his professional activity. At the beginning of September 2013, Weber decided to apply a new tactic. Instead of summoning Waldenberg to an official interrogation, he organized an informal meeting in a Freiburg beer hall. A consultation on new aspects of the case served as a pretext. I wanted to see his reaction in a less formal environment, explains Weber. People often relax when they think they are not under official interrogation. During the meeting, Weber deliberately mentioned a new clue: the rare chemical found in the camouflage mixture. He did not say that he knew about Waldenberg's purchase of this chemical, but presented the information as a recent discovery that could help identify the perpetrator. After the arrest of Kurt Waldenberg on the 10th of October 2013, the investigators finally received the opportunity to interrogate the main suspect. In the first 48 hours, Waldenberg refused to make any statement and exercised his right to remain silent. His behavior was strange, recalls police psychologist Martha Heinz. He sat motionless, barely blinked. No emotions, no concern. The tactic changed on the 3rd day. The investigators decided to show Waldenberg photos of all 3 victims and a map of the Black Forest with the marked locations where the bodies were found. He looked at the map, asked for a pencil, and marked a point northwest of the locations known to us, says Weber. Then he only said, "the first." The police immediately organized a search operation in the specified area. In the search zone, there were several old oak trees. At the 3rd one, they discovered characteristic signs: a barely visible seam in the bark where a fragment had been cut out and reinserted. Inside the tree, they found the remains of Christina Meyer, a 23-year-old student who had disappeared in May 2008. Her disappearance was not connected to the murder series since it occurred a year before Annika Schmidt's disappearance. It turned out that Waldenberg had started killing earlier than we had assumed, explains Weber. This brought us to the question, were there more victims? The next day, Waldenberg agreed to a comprehensive interrogation, but only with Weber, without the presence of other officers. I thought he would start talking about his motives or childhood traumas, as is often the case with serial killers, Weber recalls. But everything proved to be much simpler and more frightening. Waldenberg confessed that he had developed the method of hiding bodies in trees after reading a newspaper article about an unsolved murder in which the body was not found. His logic was frighteningly simple, says Weber. He said, "Without a body, there is no case. I knew that there were many old hollow trees in the forest. You just had to work on them a little." Waldenberg confessed to the murder of 4 women. He had strangled all of them with his bare hands after stunning them with a blow to the head. He attacked his victims when they passed by his car parked on the roadside on deserted streets. The most frightening thing was how matter-of-factly he spoke about it, Weber admits. As if he were talking about car repair or solving an everyday problem. The forensic psychiatric examination diagnosed Waldenberg with schizoid personality disorder and psychopathy. Psychiatrist Dr. E.K.'s Stefan Reich identified a complete lack of empathy and the inability to perceive other people as living beings. Waldenberg had no complex motives, explains Dr. Reich. He had no sexual fantasies or ideological convictions. He killed because he could, and developed a method for hiding the bodies to escape punishment. In his sick mind, everything was extremely practical. The real breakthrough in the investigations occurred on the 2nd of November 2013 when experts completed the analysis of the hard drive from Waldenberg's home computer. In an encrypted folder, they found records about the locations where he had hidden the bodies and photos of trees marked for future use. This was not a crazy diary, but simply a list of locations with coordinates and brief notes, says technical expert Daniel Kraus. Something like good tree, suitable for large victim, or too close to path, abort. The photos showed trees that Waldenberg was considering for future crimes. Some of the recordings were dated to the years 2005 to 2007. This led us to suspect that there might be more victims, says Weber. But Waldenberg denied additional murders. He said he had simply searched for suitable trees in advance. The police checked all cases of missing women in the region during the last 10 years, but found no further unsolved cases. Search teams examined the trees marked in the photos, but found no remains in them. During the interrogations, Waldenberg revealed that he selected his victims randomly. The only criterion was their route along a forest road in the evening. That is the most frightening thing, says Weber. Absolute randomness. These women were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. When asked why he voluntarily offered to help the police with the investigations, Waldenberg answered with cynical directness, "The best way not to become suspicious is to help with the investigations. I wanted to know how close you were to the solution." He confessed that he had intentionally led the police to Sabine Müller's body to strengthen his reputation as a helpful consultant and deflect suspicion from himself. That was pure manipulation, explains Hoffman. He controlled the investigations from the inside, knowing what we were looking for and where. The ideal position for a murderer. Most important for the investigations was Waldenberg's confession that he was planning a new murder. In his computer, they found a map with a marked tree and the note, "Ready for 11/10/2013. The police checked the specified location and actually discovered a prepared tree with hollowed-out interior. We arrested him literally one day before there could have been a fifth victim, says Weber. He had already prepared everything. The trial against Kurt Waldenberg began on the 3rd of March 2014. The proceedings attracted enormous media attention due to the unprecedented nature of the crimes. The defense attempted to plead insanity of the defendant, but the psychiatric assessment declared him sane and capable of understanding the nature of his actions. Throughout the entire trial, Waldenberg remained emotionless. He listened attentively to witness testimonies, occasionally took notes but never showed remorse. On the 15th of May 2014, the court sentenced Kurt Waldenberg to life imprisonment with subsequent preventive detention for quadruple murder. In prison, Waldenberg usually avoided conversations with other inmates and staff. The only significant interview he gave was to criminologist Dr. Martin Hoffer in the year 2016. I expected to hear complex explanations or justifications, reports Dr. Hoffer. But Waldenberg said everything completely clearly. I simply did not want to be caught. Trees are the ideal place to hide something. Nobody thinks to look inside a tree. When asked why he killed, Waldenberg answered without hesitation, "Because I could. They had the misfortune to encounter me." At the beginning of 2017, Waldenberg was diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer. He refused treatment. On the 28th of September 2017, Kurt Waldenberg died in the prison hospital. According to his last will, his body was cremated and the ashes scattered at an unknown location in the Black Forest. After Waldenberg's death, a strange drawing was found in his cell, scratched into the wall. A schematic plan of the forest with several markings in the form of trees. The police checked all the indicated locations, but found nothing. Maybe it was his last game with us, says Weber, or the ordinary fantasy of a madman. We will never know. The Kurt Waldenberg case was closed in December 2017. 4 proven murders, a sophisticated method for hiding the bodies, the absence of a clear motive except the desire to kill and not be caught. Ultimately, we encountered no genius of evil or a complex personality, but an abnormal person who came up with a sick idea, Klaus Weber concludes. He found an effective way to hide his crimes, and without the accidental discovery after the storm, he might have been able to continue for years. The bodies of Waldenberg's victims were buried in the cemeteries of their hometowns. The trees in which the bodies were hidden were cut down and burned. The case of the forest keeper became one of the most unusual in the history of German criminology, not because of the murderer's personality, who proved to be a banal psychopath, but because of the method for concealing the crimes, which could have worked for decades had there not been a sudden outbreak of natural force.